distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and more importantly, the young people and civil society, especially grassroots civil society organizations that are in the room. Good morning and a very warm welcome to Addis Ababa. There is no more fitting place on this continent to speak of reimagining governance than the city where the dream of African unity was first given a home. Here on this very soil of Ethiopia, more than 6 decades ago, the founders of our African Union resolved that the destiny of Africans will be decided by Africans. It is on that hallowed ground and under this Ethiopian sky that we convene the 5th edition of the ECOSOCC Citizens Forum. And it is a distinct honor on behalf of ECOSOCC to welcome you all who give actual meaning to the promise of a people-centered African Union. We are profoundly honored by the presence of Ambassador Fatala, Director General of the African Union Commission, representing the chairperson whose stewardship of the Commission's work and whose personal engagement with this forum reaffirmed the institutional centrality to citizens' participation to the Union's vision. Their presence here today speaks volume about the seriousness with which the African Union and its leaders regard the voice of civil society. This forum arrives in a proud tradition, from Lusaka in 2022 to Nairobi, to Accra to Malabo last year, and now to Addis Ababa. The Citizens Forum has grown into one of the most visible expressions of our union's commitment to its own people. And it's convened just weeks after ECOSOCC marked 22 years since its establishment on the 4th of July 2004. 22 years of insisting that the African Union belongs not only to its members states, but to its citizens. Allow me at the very outset to express our profound gratitude to the government and people of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia for receiving this forum with such warmth and grace. The circumstances that brought us to Addis Ababa called for flexibility, and the response of our host and partners reminded us of an old truth, that African solidarity is a practice to be lived. To every delegate who withdrew a plan, who rebooked a journey, and crossed borders to be in this room, thank you. Thank you very much. Your presence here is a powerful statement of commitment. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we convene under a theme that could not be timelier: reimagining global governance, Africa and the world in transition. The multilateral order forged in the aftermath of the Second World War is today under strain as never before. Institutions once thought permanent are being questioned. Financial architecture once thought settled are being contested, and new technologies are quietly redrawing the very boundaries of sovereignty. History teaches us that in every such moment of transition, the world is remade. And like my communications head rightly said, the only question that matters is who holds the pen. This forum gives its answers without hesitation. Over the next 2 days, our deliberation will move across 5 interconnected streams through the great question of our age. We will confront the reform of the United Nations Security Council and Africa's rightful seat within it. We will interrogate the global financial architecture, namely the crushing weight of debt, the hemorrhage of illicit financial flow, the injustice of a tax and trade order stacked against value on this continent. We will demand climate justice for a continent that contributes less than 4% of global emission, yet pays among the highest prices. Advancing a just energy transition and a proposal for an African situation room to strengthen our negotiation and at COP31. We will press forward on reparative justice for Africans and people of African descent, building on the AU decade of reparation. And we will shape the governance of artificial intelligence, digital sovereignty, and Africa's own digital public infrastructure so that technologies of tomorrow are instrumental in our conversation. Let us be clear, these are not 5 separate conversations. They are just one conversation about power, about fairness, and about the terms on which Africa meets a world in flux. And it is a conversation that cannot be left to chancelleries and closed rooms alone. There is a proverb known across our continent in many tongues that captures why we gather here. Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Far too long, the story of global governance has been written by others about Africa without Africa. The Citizens Forum exists so that Africa can change that narrative, because global governance, reimagined without its citizen, is nothing than old order dressed in new language. You are gathered here at a citizen forum, and that word citizen is the very reason why this organ exists. ECOSOCC is the advisory and consultative organ of the African Union, with a singular conviction that a union built in the name of Africa's people must be accountable to African people. Over the past couple of years, ECOSOCC has championed 3 interlocking frameworks that, taken together, fundamentally reshape how African citizens and civil society engage with their union. The National Chapter Framework, the Diaspora Legal Framework, and the AU Harmonized Accreditation Mechanism. Each of these frameworks serves a distinct purpose. Together, they answer for the first time the 3 questions that have defined the gap between Africa's people and their continental institution. Where is the door? Who is invited? And how do I walk through it? The National Chapter Framework answered the first. For too long, the African Union was something citizens heard about, but could not come close to. A summit and communique institution headquartered far from their realities of daily life. The National Chapter changed that fundamentally. They anchor ECOSOCC mandate in every member state, creating structured platform through which civil society organizations at the national level can engage directly with AU processes, feed into continental policy, and hold their own government to account for the commitments they sign in Addis Ababa. The union no longer waits for you to come to it. Through the national chapter, the AU is coming to you, to your villages, to your town, and your city. The Diaspora Legal Framework endorsed in 2025 answered the second. Africa does not end at its coastline. Our 6th region, the millions of Africans and people of African descent living across the globe, carries knowledge, capital, enterprise, and advocacy power that the continent cannot afford to treat as incidental. Yet for years, diaspora engagement with the union was episodic, at best, and sentimental at worst. This framework replaces that pattern with permanent architecture. It gives the diaspora institutional standing as constituent member of the African Union project, with structured pathways into ECOSOCC General Assembly, including 20 dedicated seats for diaspora, and into the broader decision-making of the African Union. This evening, we begin to give that framework operational life as we gather for a dialogue on unlocking diaspora capital for Africa's transformation, exploring our remittances, the savings, the skills, and the enterprise of our 6 regions can be marshaled into structured, investable capital for the continent. The AU Harmonized Accreditation Mechanism, also endorsed in 2025, answered the third, and perhaps the most consequential question: how do I walk through the door? If there is one barrier that African civil society has raised with the AU more than any other, it is this: the rules of access were fragmented and too often dependent on whom you knew rather than what you stood for. Different organs, different procedures, different standards. A maze where there should have been a pathway. The Harmonized Accreditation Mechanism dismantled that maze. For the first time, a single transparent gateway governs constitutive status across the entire African Union. One set of rules, one process, one standard, and it applies equally, whether you are an organization in Kampala or in Lusaka, or in Boston or in London. But a mechanism is only as good as it means to reach it. That is why next month, ECOSOCC will launch what we call ECOSOCC Connect, the digital platform that gives accreditation mechanism and indeed all 3 frameworks the operational spine. Through ECOSOCC Connect, any civil society organization from the continent or the diaspora will be able to apply for accreditation, register with a national chapter, track the status of an application, and also answer the call for the 5th General Assembly. And for your information, we have basically extended the call for application up to the 31st of July. So please take advantage, because you now have what we call a single portal that you can apply, get membership, and get the various status, both consultative and observer status. There will be no intermediaries, no guesswork, no closed door. It is, in the most practical sense, the bridge between you, your work, and the decision that shape the world. And it means that the pathway from a community anywhere on this continent and anywhere in our diaspora to the heart of the African Union will be visible, navigable, and open to all. Now, the frameworks and platform must stand on a solid legal ground. And if they are to endure beyond the tenure of those who built them, this is where the most consequential reform of all must be acknowledged: the adoption of the revised ECOSOCC statute by the 39th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government, following the 48th ordinary session of the Executive Council in February 2026, has given everything I have just described the force of continental law. This is one of the most far-reaching reforms of this organ since its establishment under the Constitutive Act. The revised statute strengthened ECOSOCC operational mandate. It widened the categorization of organization and individual eligible to participate. It introduces new mechanism through which citizen voice enters. AU decision-making as a structured future of governance. And critically, it enshrines the national chapter, the diaspora architecture, and the accreditation mechanism within the legal framework of the union itself. So these are no longer policy choices that can quietly shelve, but they are commitments that bind the institution and all who served it. Let me say this directly, or in another word: The national chapter brings the union to its people. The diaspora framework brings its people home. The harmonized accreditation mechanism opens the door. ECOSOCC Connect puts the key in every hand, and the revised statute locks the whole architecture into the legal foundation of the African Union permanently. That distinguished delegate is the most deliberate, most comprehensive effort this union has ever made to open the civil society space, to bridge the gap between the people of this continent and the institution that govern their name. And you are the proof to that promise being kept. Allow me to salute our development partners and philanthropic partners whose confidence in African civil society continues to bear fruit. AU member states for the unwavering support to the Secretariat and the members of the ECOSOCC Bureau and General Assembly whose political leadership steered this organ, and especially this particular event, which is fundamentally led by the presiding officer. It is with your trust and support for 5 consecutive years we are hosting the Citizens Forum. It is now first to me to yield the floor to the addresses that will formally open this forum and set the direction of our deliberation over the next 2 days. My role here was basically to welcome you, but as usual, slowly becoming a politician instead of being a civil society, I need to give you some basic information so that I set the context as the one who is leading the Secretariat, and you have a better understanding of some of the things that we are doing. And therefore, on behalf of ECOSOCC, I once again welcome you and each and every one of you, and I look forward to the 2 days of rigorous, honest, and consequential exchange. Thank you very much for the opportunity to listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Keru. It's very clear from his remarks that Africa has never lacked a voice. The question is, are the global systems ready to listen to us? Let's find out. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Adesola, to walk you through the rest of the program. So once again, I welcome you to the annual Citizens Forum, and thank you for coming. You may clap for me. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Quite quiet. Good morning. As my colleague has mentioned, I'm Adesola Adeyemo. I'm the co-moderator for this session. But before we proceed with the opening statement, I'd like to inform everyone that we have interpretation services provided. So on channel 1, you have access to English interpretation, and channel 2 for French interpretation. So proceeding with our opening remarks, I am pleased to invite Ms. Ruth Ogbeokon from the Pan-African Lawyers Union. Ms. Ruth, you have the floor.
Morning, everyone. Good to see old faces, old friends, familiar faces. I just want to say thank you very much. And I don't know how much time I have, but I'll try to be quick. But you can just signal me if I'm rambling too much. All protocols are observed. I just want to say good morning and congratulations to the ECOSOCC Secretariat for convening us here today. I bring greetings from the Pan-African Lawyers Union and warm regards from the PALU Secretariat in Arusha, Tanzania, and appreciation for the long-standing partnership we've had with ECOSOCC, and really excited about the future and what else it is that we could do together. So my name is Ruth Ogbeokon. I'm the focal point for research and publications at the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and also the portfolio lead on reparatory justice for Africans and people of African descent. It is an honor to address you all this morning and to share, this platform with such distinguished experts. This morning, I think our task really was to set the tone for the discussions we'll be having over the next few days. And I think I would try to be diligent in using the next few minutes to just highlight, a few points for reflections. The first thing that I do want to bring out, or at least highlight, is that we're certainly, I think, at a point where we can recognize that the global governance system, and particularly multilateralism, is changing. Some would even go as far as to say it is collapsing, or it has already collapsed. And I think we should first of all accept that things are not as they usually are. And what's going on right now is really inevitable, because if you reflect and you think about the current framework and the inherent inequalities that came to be in the setup, you would understand why it had to come to this point, right? The system has been inherently fragile, particularly when viewed from the global south or from Africa's perspective. From the inception, it was designed, implemented, structured, reformed by the global north, or the global majority, the old global majority countries, the superpowers. And whereas there was very little say in what the new global majority, which is the global south, could do and say in the process of reform and implementation and design, the impact of that framework was profoundly felt in our societies, every aspect of our societies. And so what then happened, or what I think happened, was that even when global south countries, or the new global majority, were entering ad hoc, of course, into this framework, it was a situation of just join what you see and you play ball, with very little room for moving around or changing things in the ways that it would have worked for us. And so as a result, what has persisted for several years or decades is that the promise is the inherent inequality and the failure to deliver on the promise of mutuality and equal treatment within this framework. And to be fair, that has been more aspirational than real for many global south countries, for Africa particularly, both at the citizen level, at the institutional level, and even the way in which as a bloc we operated inside this global governance system. And so today, where we stand, and without going too much into the history or the context of everything that's going on, I mean, you all see the news and you know what's been happening. But where we stand today, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you ask, of course, the pressure on the global governance system, or the global governance architecture, is at the highest form it's ever been. And I don't know that the system can withstand that pressure, right? And this is manifested in different ways. We see fissures and we see fractures in institutions versus states. The global governance institutions are now seeing challenges with respect to fundings because states are no longer contributing. We're seeing breaks in states versus states. So even the enforcers of this framework are now quarreling amongst themselves. And the law and the template that initially was agreed upon is now being disproportionately applied. So that's another fracture we're seeing in the system. And we're seeing fractures, of course, with the emergence of the new global south, the new global majority. We're seeing an emergence of kind of competing global power in this regard. And so the direct impact of this, of course, would be, an easy one to cite would be the polarization of the peace and governance systems. You can see the unique way in which the world came together in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then you directly compare that with the Israel-Gaza conflict, and you also compare the response, the pace of the response with other situations like in Syria, Myanmar, and so on and so forth, and you really start to understand and you start to see the difference in equality, the manifestation of that in real time. There is, of course, also an international economic crisis, not just with respect to development financing, but also with respect to trade. The ongoing war, conflict between the US and Iran has affected a lot of economies at the global level, at the national level, and that is putting strain on the already strained architecture of financing for development globally. Displacement crisis, of course, because of climate change, because of conflict and wars, people can no longer stay in their homes. And so there is this huge movement of people from one place to the other, which is putting strain on even more resources, putting strain on less resources than we had. And so ultimately, the summary really is that global governance is collapsing, and at the same time, ongoing a significant transformation. Now, I would like to think that most of us cannot see into the future, but of course we are Africans and we have African spirituality. So no disrespect, some people can, but I like to think that most of us can't see into the future. So I don't know where this is heading, but it's heading somewhere. And the analogy that I think about is when you apply pressure to a tube of toothpaste, the paste inside jumps out. Where the paste will go, I'm not sure, but we know it will jump out. And so the current framework is under immense pressure, and African states, the global majority, the global South, are jumping out of that system, of that tube. And how do we then organize ourselves to be sure that where we land is not worse than the tube we were in the first place? And I think that honestly, in the next few days, and I hope, and this is to conclude, in the next few days, something that I really hope that we would come together and discuss is to really understand that the last few years currently has been a journey of self-discovery as Africans, as groups of Africans, as, people within a system like the African Union, and really trying to prepare ourselves. We're taking stock of the past, we're reckoning with our past, we're taking stock of our present, and we're thinking about where we're going to land strategically in the future. And this has already been happening. I mean, there's been several discussions, I think even from Addis a few months ago in February, we were talking about alternative forms of financing. There was just a conference in Accra just a few weeks ago on reimagining development, and so on and so forth. And so my hope really is that we would continue these innovative and creative processes that we are starting to bring into the fore, the South-South solidarity. We've seen that happen, with the resolution on racialized chattel enslavement, where the Global South really came together, 123 states to vote yes, and you can see the polarizing nature of this. And so I would hope that we would continue to strengthen this and come up with ways within which we can even improve this solidarity and this connection that we have. We are really at this point at a very unique time as a continent. I think probably the last time that we had to really think really about where it is we're going to, or what our future looks like, was probably in the immediate post-independence era. And so right now we are standing at a point where, the Gen Zs will say cook, right? We are meant to cook, but the recipe is being destroyed in real time. And it's a matter of, okay, we don't have a template, but we still have to improve and we still have to go forward. And so we really have to go through an exercise of reflecting on what it is development means for us, what it means governance means for us as a people, as individuals, as groups of people, and then come up with ways in which this would happen. I don't imagine that we have the answers here today, but hopefully, I think my goal for the next few days, or my desire for the next few days, is that we would manage to push the needle of thought just a little bit further, towards the point where we can come up with real sustainable structures and systems for us. So I wish us all a fruitful deliberations ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for really setting the tone so beautifully. I believe your remarks has charged a lot of us within the room to start to think about some of these recommendations, some of the solutions that we would like to propose to some of the themes that we're going to cover over the next 2 days. I now have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Jide Okeke, the Director of the Regional Program for Africa at the UNDP RSCA. Dr. Jide, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I would like to start with an apology, especially to those at the back. I realize that there are younger people seated at the back there.
And I'll explain why. I have two teenage sons, and I struggle to keep them awake when I tell them stories. Yet my organization, UNDP, has asked me to inflict you with a statement. So for the next 5 minutes, please indulge me. And as I sat down, thinking about the theme for the forum, it struck me that if you have to reimagine global governance, it must commence with reimagining governance at home in Africa. And that would be the basis for my statement this morning. So let me say what we say in Nigeria, all protocols observed. Your Excellencies, it is my privilege to deliver these remarks on behalf of UNDP. Let me begin with a simple proposition. Governance, first and last, is about people. It is strongest when citizens are not an audience. And I'm very surprised that a lot of young people are seated at the back, not to say anything about the people seated in front. So it is strongest when citizens are not an audience for public policy, but participants in its design, delivery, and oversight. That is why for us, this forum matters, and why UNDP is proud to partner with ECOSOCC in making it possible. I congratulate Ambassador Karu, Mr. Sissoko, and your teams for once again convening this gathering. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, institutions designed decades ago are constrained because of today's interconnected crisis. Conflict, climate, debt, inequality, technological disruption. We hear this every day. They demand for reform and fairer representation. And that is why it is important that Africa's positions in these debates must not only reflect the voices of states and institutions, but the priorities of African citizens. This is the work of this forum and beyond. Let me now stress the most important point. On what citizens want, the evidence is unambiguous. Africans are not giving up on democracy. They are demanding that democracy deliver. And let me state 3 facts. The first, UNDP joint study with the African Union, soldiers and citizens. Some of you may be familiar. If you're not, please Google search that report. It surveyed 8,000 citizens, and 5,000 of those citizens that were surveyed were from countries that experienced in recent times military coups. Even among those who lived in context of unconstitutional changes of government, 1 out of 10 preferred one non-democratic rule. In 2024 alone, some of you may be surprised, some 200 registered voters across, 200 million registered voters across 20 African elections turned out to affirm their choice, with peaceful transfers of power in Botswana, Ghana, Mauritius, and Senegal. That is quite profound. The second point that is important to stress is that despite this data that I've just provided to you, the same data carries a warning. Only 1 out of 3 Africans believe they live in a functioning democracy. That is very sobering. And only 1 out of 3 of them are also satisfied with how it works. Since 2020, as many of you would know, Africa has experienced 9 military coups, and that is a call for real analysis. The lesson is clear. Military coups do not happen because people reject democracy. They are likely to happen where governance fails to deliver security, services, jobs, and dignity. The deficit is not in citizens' commitment, it is in delivery. And that is why UNDP and ECOSOCC are working together under the Africa Facility to Support Inclusive Transitions to ensure citizen and civil society perspectives shape responses to political transitions. My third and final point, delivery requires policy consistency. In fact, the most important point here. Development is built across electoral cycles, not within them. Where rules are predictable, where reforms survive changes of government, constitutions are not instruments of convenience, and national plans outlast the administrations that draft them. These are really important. When all of this happen, trust compounds and investment stays. Therefore, when we think about Agenda 2063, it cannot be achieved in 5-year fragments. It demands consistent, accountable, citizens-anchored policy sustained over time, over generations, I would argue. So no one holds a greater stake in long-term development on the African continent than African youth. The African youth are actually the youngest population on earth, not just in Africa. Therefore, the defining choice of governments is whether to treat what we're referring sometimes to Gen Zs as a political risk to be managed or as a governance partner to be engaged. UNDP and ECOSOCC choose partnership. Our joint Gen Z accelerator would enable young Africans to shape governance processes, democratic reforms, and public accountability systems, not as beneficiaries or future leaders, but as citizens and partners in the present. And that is important to stress. The value of this forum, as we see it, therefore, will lie in how the recommendations that we put forward today travels into the African Union processes, into national decision-making processes, and through sustained engagement with citizens. The data before us tells us that Africans believe in democratic governance. Our task is to make governance believe in Africans. I wish you a productive deliberation and look forward to the next couple of days. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okeke, for your remarks and also reminding us of the importance of inclusive governance and democratic institutions, and also the importance of partnerships in making democracy fit for purpose for African citizens. It is now my honor to also invite to the stage Mr. Louis Sheikh Sissoko, the presiding officer of ECOSOCC, to deliver his opening remarks. Presiding officer.
Thank you very much, Ade. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency Ambassador Lamin Bali from Sahrawi Republic, Your Excellency Ambassador Sophia Nyamudeza from Zimbabwe, Your Excellency Ambassador Fatala, representative of African Union Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Mrs. Cheryl Akinyi, Program Manager for Democratic Futures in Africa at OSF, Mrs. Roth from African Lower Union, Mr. Leon from European Partnership for Democracy, Mrs. Anika from Include, Mr. Mahmoud from Reform Initiative, Your Excellency Ambassador William Kayu, Head of the ECOSOCC Secretariat, Mr. Khalid Boudali and Mr. Richard, former Presiding Officer of ECOSOCC, partners, leaders of civil society organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observes. It is both an honor and a singular privilege to welcome you to the 5th edition of the ECOSOCC Citizens Forum here in Addis Ababa, the diplomatic capital of our continent, the home of the African Union, and in many respects, the place where Africa continually returns to imagine itself renew. There are periods in history when change unfolds gradually, almost unnoticed, until the foundations of the old order begin to shift. Then there are moments when the pace of transformation accelerates, when new realities emerge faster than institutions can adapt, and when societies are called upon to rethink not only what they do, but who they are and the role they seek to play in the world. We are living through such a moment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, across every region of the world, we are witnessing shifts in geopolitical influence, economic power, technological innovation, climate responsibility, and the very architecture of international cooperation. Institutions once considered permanent are being questioned. Alliances once proved immovable are changing. New voices are demanding recognition in the decisions that define our future. These changes will determine the opportunities available to every African nation and every African citizen. And so, the world is being rewritten for Africa. This presents both an obligation and an opportunity. The question before us is no longer whether our continent will participate in global affairs, but how we will exercise our growing influence in determining the character of the world that is emerging. Because only Africa can conceive the future of a global governance, and the voices of African citizens can construct it. Before governments develop policies, citizens have already experienced the realities those policies seek to address. Before institutions design solutions, communities have already demonstrated resilience and innovation in confronting challenges. And before history records the achievements of leaders, it is ordinary people who carry societies forward through extraordinary times. This is the spirit of the ECOSOCC Citizens Forum. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, this forum was established on the belief that African governance becomes stronger when it listens to, learns from, and is informed by the citizens itself. We began this forum asking a radical question. What if we reimagined how we engage citizens? What if our forum empowered citizens to participate, contribute, and author change? Today, we can proudly say that this vision has continued to take root. Since then, what began as an ambitious platform has matured into one of the African Union's foremost spaces for structured citizens' engagement, from to Nairobi, from Accra to Malabo, and now here in Addis Ababa. Each edition has grown in stature, impact, reach, and the quality of the conversations it has convened. We have shown the African citizens have the right, the capacity, and the responsibilities to shape the decisions that affect their lives. We have proven that citizen engagement is not a Western import, but a Pan-African imperative centered around our own traditions of dialogue. Our societies have always understood that wisdom does not reside only within centers of authority, but also within communities, movements, and citizens whose lived experiences provide essential guidance for decision making. Our gathering today is therefore a continuation of an annual tradition and an affirmation that government chambers and institutional corridors cannot exclusively determine the future of our continent. Across Africa, citizens are generating ideas, building enterprises, advancing scientific discovery, protecting our environment, strengthening communities, and responding to challenges with remarkable ingenuity. The responsibility of our institutions is to ensure that this wealth of knowledge, creativity, and experience inform the decisions that define our future. It is therefore fitting that we convene under this year's theme, Reimagining Global Governance, Africa and the World in Transition. Few themes could be more timely. This forum also contributes directly to the implementation of the African Union's 2026 Theme of the Year, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. Water and sanitation are not merely development challenges. They are questions of justice, human dignity, public health, climate resilience, and sustainable peace. They remind us that global governance must ultimately improve the daily lives of our people. Africa enters this period from a position of growing significance. Our is the world's youngest continent. We possess immense natural wealth, rapidly expanding digital innovation ecosystems, and an entrepreneurial population whose creativity continues to redefine what is possible despite persistent structural constraints. There are no demographic or economic advantages. They are assets that position Africa to make contributions to the future of the global governance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the discussion we will have over the next 2 days reflects the mandate of ECOSOCC as the institutional voice of African civil society within the African Union. The significance of this forum lies precisely in the fact that it brings together the full spectrum of Africa's intellectual, social, and political landscape. That is the ECOSOCC difference. We do not convince citizens to validate decisions already taken. We convene citizens because their perspectives are essential to the decisions that our leaders must make. Civil society is not merely an observer of governance. It is a co-creator of democratic legitimacy, public accountability, and sustainable development. And this is why the forum has continued to grow in relevance and influence. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this moment to express our sincere appreciation to all those whose presence, partnership, young, and commitment have strengthened this year's forum. To Ambassador William Kerio, head of the ECOSOCC Secretariat, your study and has been instrumental in institutionalizing citizen-centered governance and building this forum into the powerful platform it is today. Your leadership, Excellency, reminds us that institutions, at their best, are instruments of people power. I also wish to extend my sincere appreciation to the entire ECOSOCC Secretariat. Your professionalism, dedication, and tireless efforts behind the scenes have made this forum possible. For your commitment and teamwork, you continue to strengthen ECOSOCC's mandate and ensure that the voices of African citizens remain at the heart of the African Union's work. I also wish to recognize the presence of my predecessors, Mr. Khalid and Mr. Richard. During Mr. Khalid's tenure, he proudly championed this initiative and contributed significantly to laying the foundation of what has become one of the African Union's leading platforms for structured citizen engagement. We are grateful for his vision, commitment, and the legacy upon which we continue to build. To our partners, we express our gratitude for your continued collaboration in advancing civic participation, inclusive development, and a people-centered approach to Africa's future. Our partnership reinforces the conviction that Africans must build sustainable solutions for Africa through African ownership, African knowledge, and African participation. And to every delegate, civil society representative, academic, expert, and citizen joining us from across the continent, thank you. Be assured that you are here because your voices matter. Your presence is the reason this forum exists. As I formally welcome you to the 2026 ECOSOCC Citizen Forum, I invite each of you to engage openly, challenge constructively, and contribute generously to the conversation that will revamp our vision for Africa and its place in the world. Let history record that when the world entered a period of profound transition, African citizens did not remain spectators. They came together, they imagined boldly, they spoke with one voice, and they helped shape a more just world. I'm equally honored to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellencies Ambassador Lamin Bahali of the Sahrawi Republic and Ambassador Sophia Nyamudeza of the Republic of Zimbabwe. Thank you, Excellencies, for joining us today and for your steadfast support of ECOSOCC. Your presence is a testament to our shared commitment to a stronger, more, and inclusive people-centered African Union. Thank you very much to be here. Before I conclude, I haven't forgotten, don't worry. Allow me to pay a well-deserved tribute to His Excellency Ambassador Fatala, the Director General of African Union Commission. In just few days, Ambassador Fatala will conclude a distinguished career in the service of Africa as he retires from the African Union Commission. It is especially fitting that this ECOSOCC Citizens Forum should mark his final public engagement and in this distinguished capacity. On behalf of ECOSOCC, I wish to express our profound gratitude for your unwavering support and your steadfast belief in the importance of citizens' engagement and your enduring commitment to strengthening ECOSOCC as the institutional voice of African civil society within the African Union. Your wisdom, leadership, and generosity of spirit have left an indelible mark on our institution and on the broader project of African integration. Your Excellency, thank you for your remarkable service to our continent. We wish you good health, every success, and continued fulfillment in the next chapter of your journey. Although you retire from office, your legacy of service to Africa will continue to inspire generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite you all to rise and join me in giving in His Excellency Ambassador Fatala ovation in recognition of his exceptional service, his distinguished career, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, for your inspiring call to action and well noted on the ovation, well-deserved ovation for the Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we're now at one of the highlights of today's program, our keynote address. We're truly privileged to be joined by a distinguished leader within the African Union. So it is with my great pleasure to invite His Excellency Ambassador Fatala Sijil-Masi, the Director General of the African Union Commission, to deliver the keynote address. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I was not expecting such a transition, but let me start by doing what I was tasked to do, which is to make the statement on behalf of His Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, whom I have the honor to represent today. And then maybe at the end, I'll say a few words at a personal level. So, Your Excellency, Monsieur Louis Sheikh Sissoko, Presiding Officer of the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, ECOSOCC, Your Excellencies, Senior Representatives of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, the representative of AU member states and diplomatic commissions, dear colleagues from the podium, all protocols observed regarding the colleagues of the podium, esteemed leaders of the civil society, partners, representatives of the diaspora, Afro-descendant communities, citizens of Africa, young people of Africa, all protocols duly respected and observed. A very good morning to all of you, and it's a privilege to address you this morning on behalf of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssef, who conveys to all of you his warmest greetings and shares with you his conviction that reimagining of global governments will not be limited to the public institutions, as it truly extends to gatherings such as this one, where the citizens speaks for the continent and the world listens. Our citizens' aspirations, experiences, and priorities guide our continental agenda, Agenda 2063. Allow me at the outset to thank the government and people of the Federal Republic, Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, gracious host to our union and to this forum. Let me also express the Commission's deep appreciation to the partners whose solidarity made this gathering possible. The International Dialogue Center, CAICID, the United Nations UNDP and its Regional Bureau for Africa, the European Economic and Social Committee, the European Partnership for Democracy, and of course the ECOSOCC, presided by His Excellency and its Secretariat under the very able leadership of His Excellency Ambassador William Carew, to whom I'm extending warmest greetings. Greatest appreciation for the tireless stewardship of the governance of the ECOSOCC. Your partnership altogether is in itself an inspiration that the reform of a shared world is a work of dialogue across regions, across generations, and across peoples. The Africa we want begins with the citizens we empower. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we are living through one of those rare moments where the scaffolding of the old world order is under stress. It has been said repeatedly this morning, while the blueprint of the next one has not yet been drawn. The ground is shifting beneath us in geopolitics, in security, in finance, technology, climate, and perhaps most of all, in trust. In such moments, Africa has made its choice. We have come to hold the pen and to build the new world order and to contribute to building the new world order while the plans are still on the table. It is therefore fitting that the choice is here reaffirmed. The African Union was founded not only as a union of states, but also as a union of people. The ECOSOCC was created under Article 63 of our Constitutive Act, and together with the Citizen and Diaspora Directorate, CIDO, and I'm greeting His Excellency the Ambassador Director of CIDO, Amr Al-Gawayli, aim to give the African citizens and societies a voice within the Union and to make Agenda 2063's promise of a people-driven Africa not a slogan but a structure, one of several through which the Union brings its citizens into its work. After Lusaka, Nairobi, Accra, and Malabo, the theme you have chosen this year, reimagining global governance and a world in transition, is therefore not an academic exercise. It is a civic assignment. Permit me to walk with you briefly through its dimensions that you will all be deliberating more eloquently during the next few days and during the different panels within the framework of the very good program that has been prepared. Let's consider first the most visible symbol of unjust architecture, a United Nations Security Council in which a continent of more than 1.4 billion people holds not a single permanent seat. Africa's answer is settled and unanimous. The Common African Position anchored in the Eswatini Consensus and the Sir Declaration, no less than 2 permanent seats with all their prerogatives and 2 additional non-permanent seats. We do not ask to rearrange the chairs, we ask to reform the room. And here, civil society has an indispensable work to carry this position out of the diplomatic footnotes into the public square. through civic education, through media, through coalitions of citizens who can make the case for a fairer council in every classroom, in every newsroom. The same imbalance runs through global financial architecture. Africa too often borrows at rates that punish it. It is judged by the rating systems it did not design and loses each year to illicit financial flows more than double than what it receives from development assistance. Let me repeat this sentence. It loses each year to illicit financial flows more than double what it receives from development assistance. The Union's response is concrete. We have championed the reform of the international financial architecture and of the debt architecture and the debt management. We have engaged the financing for development process, and Africa is now standing up its own Africa Credit Rating Agency to offer a fair, a more faithful measure of our economies. Debt is contracted in the citizen's name and repaid from the citizens, schools and clinics. A civil society fluent in the languages of budgets and present in borrowers' platforms and insistent on transparency is worth more than any external monitor and is cost no more than the will to organize. Africa must continue strengthening domestic resource mobilization, deepen regional financial integration, and continue combating illicit financial flows, and of course, to continue expanding the capacities of its own institutions to finance development. The implementation of the ACFTA in this respect contribute to stronger regional value chains and greater economic sovereignty. Then there's climate, the climate issue, the injustice to which Africa contributes least and from which it suffers most. Here, more than anywhere, reform must be measured, not at the summit, but in the village. Climate justice negotiated in a distant hall must be verified where the harvest fails, where the water recedes, and where the lakes quietly shrink. Africa holds close to 2/5 of the world's renewable energy potential, yet has attracted barely 2 cents of every dollar invested in clean energy over the past decade. This is why our leaders at the Africa Climate Summit here in Addis Ababa called for Africa's share of renewable energy financing to rise to at least 1/5 by 2030. And why we press at COP31 in a few months, and then COP32 here in Addis Ababa, for genuine technology transfer and for a manufacturing base rooted in African soil so that our continent becomes a marker of the tools of transition and not merely their consumer. This is true for critical minerals as well. The newest frontier of sovereignty is digital. Artificial intelligence is already reshaping the balance of power among nations. It risks encoding a world that too often forgets us and hardening into a new, quiet form of technological dependence. Yet the Union, the African Union, sees AI, artificial intelligence, not merely as a risk, but more importantly, as a chance to leap forward. It was on this foundation that our heads of state and governments adopted in 2024 the Continental Artificial Intelligence Strategy under a banner as plain as its ambition, harnessing AI for Africa's development and prosperity. Its promise is concrete intelligence marshal to accelerate Agenda 2063, to strengthen the clinic and the classrooms, the farm and the public service, and even to preserve the wealth of our languages and of our cultures. Africa need not to remain merely the market for these technologies. It can, it should, and it will become their marker. Yet an architecture is only as just as the citizens' access to justice within it. This year we marked the 20th anniversary of the African Court on Human Rights and on Human and People's Rights, and I would like to warm greetings to my dear brother, Dr. Eno, here present with us. 2 decades of giving the African the promise of rights, a courtroom in which it can be claimed. Our respectful call is therefore for translating the language of rights into the knowledge of remedies, so that the farmer, the journalist, the ordinary citizen come to know that the court, the commission in Banjul, and the whole African human rights system belong to them. And no reimagining of the global order would be complete or honest without reparative justice for the crimes of transatlantic enslavement, colonialism, and apartheid. The African Union has carried this cause from the margins to the mainstream, from a theme of the year, last year, to a full decade of justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. Through our continental partnership with CARICOM, sealed here in Addis Ababa, Ambassador Amr, you were the leading voice on that. And through the reinforced then by the recent United Nations Resolution 802250. Reparative justice is recognition, repair, and return of dignity, of resources, and of stolen heritage. It will not be won in a single summit. It will be won across a generation, and it will need its keepers of memory, the scholars, the artists, the faith communities in our mosques, in our churches and shrines, and the diaspora, civil society, the guardian of that memory and the engine of that advocacy. Which brings me to the thread that runs through every theme of your forum. Reform is not an event that happens to citizens. It is a labor that belongs to them. Africa's voice in the world will only ever be as strong as its citizens' voice at home. So the outcome document you will produce must not become a monument to a good meeting. It must serve as a mandate for action read in our member states, carried into our institutions, and answered with accountability. This is the true meaning of citizens-centered multilateralism that we want. The Union sustains the platform where citizens shape the agenda rather than merely receive it. CEDAW and ECOSOCC are the foremost among them, the people's own organ within the Union. Alongside it, the Commission, through its Citizen and Diaspora Directorate, convenes every year the African Interfaith Dialogue Forum, the Continental Trade Union Forum, Assemblies of the Diaspora, and last year the Pan-African Congress. And this evening's dialogue, on unlocking diaspora capital for Africa's transformation that will be convened this evening will be an important step in this direction, I think a little later this evening. Excellencies, as I'm concluding, let me leave you with 4 convictions and 1 image. First, that Africa seeks not merely a seat on the table, but a hand on the pen. In the Security Council, in the global financial architecture, in the G20, and so many other forums. For we have come to reform the room, not to arrange the chairs. Second, justice must reach the citizen from the courtroom of the African court to the ledger of reparation. Third, that every transition must be a just transition in energy, in climate, in critical minerals, in industrialization and technology, and its fairness is not measured at the summit, but in the village. Fourth, that civil society is not the audience of the reform, but its author. The Africa we want begins with the citizens we empower. We will continue holding the pen, patiently, proudly, proactively, but more importantly, together. The pen is already in our hands. Let us write, in a world in transition, the fair world we wish to see. On behalf of the African Union chairperson, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, I commend the ECOSOCC and its partners for convening this timely forum. I thank you for your kind attention and wish us all very fruitful and productive deliberations. Thank you. And on a personal note, I just wanted to thank the ECOSOC chair for the kind words that he shared regarding my very humble person. I'm merely a servant of the continent, and this, you don't retire from it. So once you are a servant of the continent, you are always a servant of the continent. So thank you all, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your inspiring address and for your reflections on the African Union's vision for citizens' participation. Before we conclude with the opening, allow me to recognize some of our partners and supporters in the room. We recognize the Cambridge University, our diplomatic community, the China Commission, the European delegation, our colleagues from CEDAW, specifically recognizing Ambassador Al-Jawali, the director of CEDAW. Allow me to also recognize our ECOSOC Brain Trust, also recognizing the registrar of the court, and also Ambassador Mose. We also recognize our partners who have helped make this forum a success and possible. We recognize the reform initiatives. We recognize CAICID, Include, Trust Africa, UNDP, the European Partnership for Democracy, African Renaissance, AACC-SEDA, the Pan-African Lawyers Union, the Women's International Peace Center, RFLD, FAJ, and also Amani Africa. To conclude this session, I invite my co-director, Ms. Carol Jalombo, and also our speakers for a quick photo op before we close this session. Following this group photo, we'll move outside for a group photo with the rest of the participants. Please give a round of applause for all our speakers and also our keynote speaker. A round of applause, colleagues. Thank you. So I'm told that we'll now proceed outside for the general photo with the rest of the group. Victor, if you could please wave your hand so that colleagues can follow you. Thank you.